Subscribe to our YouTube channel for in-depth interviews of India Inc. and press the bell icon so that you do not miss our updates.
Very good morning to all the people who joined into this very, very special broadcast. My guest this week is someone who's very special and very, very dear to me. Someone I've known over the last 15 years and has almost been a quasi mentor to me in many ways. Although we don't interact much during the year or even over the years, I can tell you that his life is exemplary. Mr. Amit Chandra, who is an engineer by training from VJTI, pursued his MBA from Boston, started off his career with L&T, and then had a very long stint with DSP Merrill Lynch for about 13 or 14 years before having a brief stint with New Silk Route, and then, of course, being the managing director and chairman of Bain India for the last a little over a decade. That's a very brief resume. There's a lot that he's done beyond this. Of course, he's been headlined on Forbes in the last edition, and a lot of work has gone into philanthropy by Amit as well over the years. And he's been specifically pointed out for that in many publications in India. He's also served on the board of many companies. Of course, most of you would know he's recently been on the board of the Tatas. He's been on L&T Finance, MPure. The list is quite endless. He's also the co-founder of Ashoka University. So a man that wears many hats, and I've always wondered how he juggles his time. But Amit, it's a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for taking time out to do this. I know I've been chasing you to do this for some time now. I can assure you that there are some very, very big names who have joined into this broadcast to listen to your thoughts. And some that you've interacted with, I'm sure, from an investment banking perspective over the years. So I want to start off by just, a very polite, hope everything is well at home, at work, family, friends, all of that, and COVID's been okay for you.
Thank you, Rahul, for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure being here. It has been a very difficult period. We've lost many friends during this time, both to COVID as well as non-COVID, and I think, but that is life, and we have to move on. That's the reality of the situation we're dealing with.
So I think, Amit, because your career has been so diversified, I'm probably going to try and spend the next 1 hour and try and compartmentalize the questions such. So let's start with the work aspect, and as we go along, we'll sort of get into your transition into philanthropy and things like that. You have had two very long stints in financial services with DSP Merrill Lynch and now with Bain, in an industry which is otherwise known very highly for attrition. Obviously, loyalty is a very important trait that you possess, and I assume you look for in young leaders as well. How did you manage those two stints, and spending, I'm guessing, half your working life in just two organizations?
Yeah, Rahul, I think I learned, very early on. First of all, I had great mentors, and I tell young professionals all the time that one of the things that you should really seek is great mentors. If you are fortunate in life to find great mentors, you should really hang on to them. They teach you a lot. You can observe them. Sometimes they will impart something to you directly as well. But I learned that, other than what you can just simply earn financially and be rewarded by growth from careers, just what you can imbibe in terms of values from these mentors by serving in these organizations is just tremendous. I think in both the organizations that I have been in, the growth I've had because of having great mentors around me has been enormous. I also realized very early on in life that if you run life as a marathon and not as a sprint, actually you can get much further on. And I learned that by observation. If you look at people you really admire in the corporate world, you realize that that's how they have actually succeeded. And so when I joined DSP, I remember there was an onslaught of international investment banks around the time when I was a young officer. And there was a great tendency to try to grow by simply moving from job to job. I resisted that urge, and often people would do it for a 30%, 40% jump in salary for a title. But I think resisting that proved to be the most sensible thing I could do, because for the combination of having awesome mentors like Hemendra Kothari and some of the people I worked with at Merrill and Shitin Desai, and just simply being in an organization, having institutional memory around me, was probably the most sensible thing I did in terms of building a really robust financial services base. And I think even just beyond just, being able to really build an institution as opposed to just build, a banking career. That stuck with me, and I think when I joined Bain Capital as well, I realized that I had an opportunity to really build a private equity firm as opposed to just build an investing career. And I think I again had the opportunity to work with some outstanding professionals, learn investing from scratch from them. And I seized that with both hands. In the process, again, I had the opportunity to, think more broadly about how to deploy the principles of building an organization that I learned at DSP and deploy those. And it's been a wonderful journey. So I tell people all the time that, look, you may get further on in the short run by, jumping from job to job. And often if you make a mistake in a job, by all means, jump. I've made mistakes, but if we thoughtful about getting in, if you make a mistake, get out. But when you find something good, seize it with both hands and just stick with it.
You've obviously taken a lot of companies public over the years, and obviously then moved on to private equity where you've been an investor. How has your approach towards looking at companies and the way they should be growing and their ethos changed when you were wearing both of those hats?
Yeah, actually, my ethos hasn't changed much. My ethos in taking companies public was actually developed by Shitin Desai. And bankers used to hate going to IPO pitches with Shitin. I used to love going to them with Shitin. The reason was Shitin would enter a promoter's boardroom or a cabin and actively dissuade them from going public. And that's why a lot of bankers used to not like taking Shitin to those meetings. And the reason was Shitin would actually tell them that going public is a big responsibility. You'll be miserable as a public company. You got to think really hard whether you want to be public or not. He would grill them whether they had everything that it takes to be a public company. And this is well before the time when, the quarterly statements became the norm and governance standards were really high. And so I actually got, grounded in all those concepts and principles by Shitin. And lots of promoters would squirm. DSP lost some of those mandates because of how Shitin would, grill promoters. And he would do it fearlessly. We still had, a 30-40% share of the market. So if we lost 5 points of it, Shitin wouldn't care. But that stuck with me. I actually believe that's the right attitude. I think most companies, and India is a graveyard of companies who have poor following. We have way too many listed companies. If there's one thing I would implore SEBI to do is make it much easier for companies to delist, because so many of these companies have very poor following, don't deserve to be public, and it would be much better from a governance point of view and from a minority shareholder point of view. These companies were indeed private companies and not public companies. So I personally believe that people need to think really hard before they go public. Standards need to be high for public companies. Standards need to be high for every company, but particularly high for public companies.
I remember we first met when I was 25 years old, Amit, and let's sort of rewind the clock back then, and let's assume that, I was starting off my career as a startup entrepreneur, and I came to you to raise funds. What would you look for in me before I got a check from you?
So fortunately, I'm not an early stage venture investor. I'm more of a late stage guy. But look, I think for any investor, what we really look for in an entrepreneur is a few simple things. This is investing. Is a combination of art and science. The science part of it, I think, is relatively well known. You can deploy all the spreadsheets you want. You can deploy all the industry frameworks that you want to make sure a company, business is well positioned. I think it's where we go wrong is actually often is the people front. I think on the people front, what you really are looking for is, does someone have high integrity? Does it have what it takes to be a marathon runner? Does the person have what it takes to run a good team, build a good team? Because businesses are not just about individuals; they are about teams. And particularly as you start scaling, you really need to, build teams. So can this person really be the conductor of an orchestra, and as opposed to just a solo artist? I think you need to really look at that. Can this person actually serve all stakeholders, as opposed to just one or two stakeholders in an imbalanced way? I think these are some of the most critical things that as investors we really look for, and these are judgment calls. I think where we typically go wrong as investors is on one or more dimensions of these judgment calls. I would add in all of this, of course, the marathon running part is probably very important, because a lot of people lose, steam at some stage. The integrity part is really important. People, again, at some stage start shortchanging one stakeholder versus the other. So there are lots of mistakes that people end up making. The funnel is always wide at the top. Not every entrepreneur lands up becoming successful. Many land up being moderately successful, and very few land up being extremely successful. And it's a combination of competence, skills, and luck. Intent and luck. The combination of those three things, and the intersection of those three is unfortunately a very, very small data set.
If I'm not mistaken, you are also a follower of Rumi. And if I was to take a quote off there, it says, yesterday I was clever and I tried to change the world. Today I am wise and I try to change myself.
Yes.
Can you apply that to a practical situation that you have seen in your career?
Well, I apply that to I apply that to my approach towards philanthropy. I think for me, the entire approach to philanthropy has been about changing myself and less about changing the world. People often, come up to me and congratulate me for what my wife and I have been doing. And I try to explain to them that this is that is actually very selfish. Our journey is a lot more about giving ourselves joy and satisfaction with what we are blessed with. And it is because what Mumia said. I think at the end of the day, we do believe that it's the responsibility of us to use what we are blessed with to give back. But importantly, it's because what Mumia said, the process of doing that actually helps us evolve as people, as individuals. And this is less about, trying to go out and change the world.
I want to take you back to a point you made a little earlier, Amit. I read somewhere that you had said that one of your goals in life when you started off was to become a crorepati and be running a company at 40 and then look at a subsequent retirement. And of course, that thought process probably evolved over a period of time. But try and marry that into what you're saying in terms of being a marathon runner, because most people start off that way. I recently read a book called The CEO Factory, and I recently heard Sanjeev Mehta also speak at IIM Ahmedabad's virtual conference where he was saying, aspire to work at HUL and then, who knows, someday you'll become the head of a division, and that's like a quasi CEO, and sort of you move up. So a lot of people who come in, with that thought process, and then so on one hand you're saying run the marathon, but people are a little restless. You were too when you started out your career. So at what point does that intersect, or because those thought processes are pretty much at odds with each other?
Yeah. No, I'm a very restless person. I try to use my restlessness in a constructive manner, but I'm extremely restless. I have a diary which I use where I have every day a list of things that I want to accomplish for the day and for the week. I have goals for the year. When I started my career, I was, I had a 15-year goal for myself. I was very fortunate by the grace of God that I achieved that within 15 years. But I do. I mean, marathon runners have clear goals. I have a lot of friends who run the marathon. I envy them enormously. And I've seen all of them have a very, very clear goal orientation, and the way they train is fantastic. So I do believe that it's important for us to have good goals and then break them into smaller goals and work towards them. I think that's a very constructive process. It's what keeps us going, working towards a rhythm, towards developing ourselves as productive human beings. And so, but I've also realized that the nature of humanity is that things change. Sometimes you achieve your goals early. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes circumstances around you change. And so you got to reassess your goals periodically. You don't reassess your goals necessarily because, you lower the bar, and that's not a good thing to do. But you got to reassess your goals realistically. And so for me, I think I reassess my goals because, for me, I was just lucky, at least the financial goal got hit much earlier than I'd expected. And I was fortunate again, the goal of what I wanted to do in terms of running a company got hit very early, and then those didn't seem like good goals to just rest upon. And so I actually went through a process of. It was actually when I hit those goals, I felt quite empty, and those goals seemed like silly goals in some ways. So I remember having a long conversation with Hemendra, and I took a sabbatical and went and set new goals for myself at the end of that sabbatical. And so I think it's important in life to set goals in different aspects of one's life, and I've always had that.
How do you see the private equity industry today, Amit? As we speak this morning, there's been $1 billion deal that's been struck, and it involves one of your friends and mentors, I assume.
Yeah, we were one of the losers in it.
No. So, how do you see that space having evolved today? Where are we in the sort of evolution of private equity investments in India, so to speak? So let's take you back to when you started Bain about a decade or a little more than that today.
Yeah.
And where do you see it going from there?
Yeah, the private equity industry is actually an extremely important industry to India's economic evolution. I'm not saying that because I'm a part of it. I've had a ringside view to India's private equity industry since the days I was running DSP. Even before that, when I was actually an investment banker, I actually started the first private equity servicing group at DSP. It was run by a colleague of mine, Ajay Garg, who now runs Equities. So I've seen how this industry has evolved right from the early days, and it's really interesting. I mean, again, I would never have predicted that it would have hit the scale that it's hit, but it's some data which is pretty staggering. This year, private equity flows into India will be close to $50 billion. And just to put in context, I'll be close to half of all FDI in the country. So that's why when I say that it's really important for India's economic development, I think we got to realize that there was a time when India was all about FIIs. I think India has got to recognize how critical private equity is for India's economic development. Because unlike FII flows, which are highly volatile, they could go in and out based on what happens in global macro. Private equity flows typically come in with a 3 to 10 year horizon. Most investors at least hold on for their investments for 5 years at the median. They generate a lot of employment, and so this is a stable capital pool which is coming in with increasingly with a positive trajectory and is really, really large. And so that's really good news. Also, I think India is becoming a more and more important destination for private equity. So I think that's all really good news. All the big players are already here. The top 10 names, if you look at globally, we are all here, I think, with the exception of one or two. So I think that's all good news for India. And I think India needs to probably do a few more things to nurture the private equity industry and make it feel even more welcome. I mean, it generally feels India is a good destination. I think India still has this little of a bias towards FIIs and thinks FIIs are the most important source of capital. But I think things have changed a lot. We don't realize how much it's much more about private equity than it is about FIIs.
How have you dealt with failures, Amit? Not everything that you touch would have turned good, obviously. You would have made some bad investments also. Some very frustrating times where you just have to come home and reflect. How important is that in the journey of an evolving professional, and how have you dealt with this?
Yeah, Rahul, great question actually. I actually, and I say this again, to youngsters a lot, that your failures will teach you a lot more about uh, both life as well as about uh, professional, do's and don'ts than you're successful. And even, people I have learned from have taught me exactly the same thing. When you hear it first, you kind of wonder what exactly do they mean. But when you go through it, you realize what that really means. Um, when you're successful, you kind of just breeze through success very, very easily. But when you are actually down, it makes you much more reflective. Um, you tend to think much harder. People don't tend to think a lot deeply uh, about things, when unless the chips are down. They don't tend to change their strategy unless the chips are down. Um, and I personally feel that, so what I've learned is that you need to, the best strategy for life is learning from failure, and then and doubling down on success is a good combination, good approach. Of course, I know if I would add another dimension to that is making sure you don't get arrogant and heavy-headed with success. I think is extremely important as well. But failure can often, especially if you don't let yourself get overcome by it, can be invaluable to your long-term success. Invaluable to your long-term success.
I could flip that question around as well, Amit. How important is it to introspect success?
Yeah, I think it is important to introspect success, but you have to be very careful in how you do it. People often do it in a rah-rah manner. Uh, so you have to do it in a level-headed way and with people who are also level-headed. Uh, and I think there, uh, you know, there's a word called sangat that we Punjabis use. Who you surround yourself is very important. Often people surround themselves with, folks who basically, will just tell you, they'll only talk to you about your success. Um, they won't really, they'll talk behind your back about your failures. They'll only hype up your success. And so you won't really learn, therefore, the right lessons. I think what you need to do is if you can really have objective discussions with people uh, in about both success and failure. I think that's what's important. And so I think doing that is very valuable. Also, one other dimension I would add, which is something that we do, is that it's also important to learn from success and failures of others in an objective way. Often people don't do that. Um, you know, People tend to be dismissive of the success of others. They tend to be envious of it, and they tend to be derisive of failures of others and not learn from that. I think if you can really learn the right lessons from why others have failed and make sure you don't repeat the same mistakes, I think that can be very, very valuable as well.
So when we sent out the flyer of this conversation, Amit, one of the important things that we put on there was, creating and maintaining effective relationships. And I, sort of read somewhere that you've not been a big proponent of wining and dining clients over the years. It's just your work that's spoken for itself. And it resonates with me because, that's something that I've tried to bring into my work over the last 20 years that I have worked. And incidentally, even at my organization, we don't even give or take Diwali gifts. So, I mean, that's literally how work to work we keep it. But sort of tell me a little bit about how you went about, sort of developing these relationships, whether it was with Mr. K.V. Kamath or Kalpana Moparia or Mr. Piramal, and, even through the other deals that you have worked with, and how have these stayed with you over the years? I think that's a very, very important part because, coming from where I do, I think a lot of people even today believe that sales is all about taking your clients out to a fancy restaurant, ordering the most expensive whiskey on the menu and so on and so forth. But you've done it sustainably over your entire career. How have you done it so effectively, and what sort of the success mantra, so to speak?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't think it was just me. There was a while where Rajiv Gupta and I jointly ran DSP, and then he moved on to start Carlyle in India. And then I was at DSP, and Hemendra used to often joke about how neither of us would, he ever signed an entertainment bill for neither of us. He said, what kind of guys do I have running the firm? So both of us were of the same mold. Look, I think I personally believe, and I believe this right through, that this whole concept of wining and dining, I don't have a allergic reaction to it, but I do think that it's highly overrated. I'm sure there's some people who would like to be wined and dined. So it's not that that doesn't work for some. I'm sure it works for some, but at least for me, my family life came first, and I personally felt that if you could achieve what you wanted to achieve in a professional meeting and build the relationship that you wanted to build in a professional meeting, then you didn't need to really, go and even take that person's family time and go and wine and dine. I never had interest in golf in any case, so go and play golf with them. Now the question was that how do you really build that relationship? Look, I think there were a few things that I think really mattered in terms of building deep, enduring personal relationships with people. I personally feel that you had to be really good at your job. And I think that there were many bankers who were good at their jobs. I don't think I was relatively unique with DSP. But I do think that where we could differentiate ourselves, and this is where I think I owe a lot of gratitude to people like Hemendra and Shitin, was there were few people who really thought for the client and put the client's interest before theirs. I learned that right from the first day that I started my investment banking career. To have that sincerity, I think was something which was invaluable. And for clients to see that sincerity, I think was something which I think was a differentiator. I remember very early on in it was probably my second or third year as a young banker, I went and made a presentation to the Birla Group. Kumar Birla had just taken over. His father had just passed away. And, I had met him maybe the second time. And they wanted to raise money, a huge public issue. They wanted to raise money for a paper project in Indian Rayon, I think the company was called at that time. And every banker must have gone and presented a very prestigious deal, massive, thousands of crores. And I was tasked with making that presentation. I analyzed everything possible. I came to the conclusion that the company should not do the project. I made half the presentation on how they should do it, and I made half the presentation on why they should not even do the project. And I remember going and making that presentation, and there was pin drop silence when we made the presentation. It was, really received in a very odd manner. At that time, they used to sit in Industry House. They could make out they were shell shocked to receive a recommendation when they expected a discussion on how they should finance this. That there was this, young, twerk of a banker coming in telling them that, why they should not do this. And I had Hemendra by my side, and I had Pradeep Dokania, who was my boss, all of them. And they were quite shocked by the reaction we got, which was quite cold. And we were ushered out. And 2 weeks later, we got a check in the mail of 5 lakh rupees saying, thank you for your presentation. And we assumed we were basically out of the mandate, but we were shocked that we received a check for 5 lakh rupees for the presentation that we made. Surprisingly, they decided to junk the project because some conversation must have happened. But we landed up becoming the core advisors to the Birla Group, and actually I at least landed up building an amazing relationship with Kumar Birla from there on, and we did. They became one of our top 2 or 3 relationships over a long period of time, at least till I left DSP. I would say it was one of the biggest joys I had was working very closely with him on a string of transactions, which reshaped the Birla Group, into what it was. And I would say that was a good example of always putting the client's interest first and thinking for the client, even whether they liked the message or they didn't like the message. I think we always did that, whether it was ICICI or L&T or Tata's or Birla's. I think we always did that. And I think I'm very grateful to people like Hemendra and Shitin for having taught me to basically do that.
I'm going to ask you a slightly provocative question in the backdrop of a recent assignment of yours, but sort of we can take it back in time to some of the other investments that you have made as well. And it's a very short question. How do you resolve conflict?
Yeah. Look, I think resolving conflicts is you have to ideally resolve conflict through dialogue. And that's it's important to always talk to the other side. It's always important also to put yourself in the other side's shoes to resolve conflicts. But Rahul, often the reality is that that doesn't happen. And therefore, sometimes that mechanism breaks down. And it breaks down despite your best intent. And you have to then, be willing to enter a difficult period where that conflict will get resolved through another mechanism. Which is unfortunate. Not every conflict can be resolved, and this is true, by the way, about whether it's marriages or office relationships or even deals that we do, or how we present them to investment committees, or anything in life. I think many conflicts get resolved by inaction. Some get resolved through constructive dialogues. Some go to, you bring in a third party who can mediate. Some get resolved by just simply two parties talking to each other. And unfortunately, some land up, going to court, and their bitterness then prevails. Generally, sometimes time is a healer. But that is reality. And I've also learned in all of this that, there are different kinds of people in the world. There are lots of people who are bystanders, people who take sides, people who like sensationalism, who will encourage conflict. Very few people who actually help during conflict in resolving conflicts. In the world, I've realized that most people like conflict, which is unfortunate. Lots of people like to encourage conflict because if you look at Netflix these days, the ratio of Netflix dramas relating conflict versus love is very skewed. The world wants to see conflict, which is unfortunate in my view.
But there's a reason for that as well, Amit, isn't it? Netflix is an American company, and I don't want to delve too much into why the United States loves conflict and how the defense industry in the United States came up. But sort of just crossing over now, and for a lot of people that probably got to know you over the last 5 years, let's talk a little bit about the philanthropy chapter. If I'm not mistaken, I read somewhere that you and your family, including your wife, have donated 27 crores of your income last year to charity, and you continue to want to donate about 70% of your income. Where did this thought germinate from? I mean, things, there must have been some inflection point. Something must have happened for you to go down this road. I mean, we all hear charity begins at home from a very young age, but you've sort of taken it to a very different level in your personal life. So can you talk to us a little bit about where this journey started? What was the trigger point?
Yeah, Rahul, I think, look, my wife and I have always believed that whatever we are blessed with, we must use that for societal purposes. So even from the day we got married, we basically started using some of what we had, for seeding scholarships. And we didn't have much at that time. We used to stay in a paying guest in our first few years, but we started seeding scholarships way back then. And so as gradually our income grew, we started doing whatever more we could. There have been inflection points along when we increased both the quantum and the percentage of giving. At some point of time, as I said, I'm a very target-oriented person, and so we decided that we should, like everything else in life, you set targets for yourself. We should set some targets and goals for ourselves in philanthropy as well. And so, many years ago, my friend Abhay Havaldar, who used to run General Atlantic Partners, actually sent me a book called The Billionaire Who Wasn't. And it was about the life of Chuck Feeney, the founder of General Foundation, Atlantic Philanthropies, which basically was the money which seeded General Atlantic Partners. And he actually gave away 99% of his wealth during his lifetime. The last dollar was spent earlier this year, almost $8 billion. And we read that, and we felt that it was actually a very interesting framework. Um, and so that inspired us to think about why should we not have a more structured target that we should work towards. And so my wife and I went through an exercise. We had, in any case, been upping the percentage amount, every year on a consistent basis. And we decided that we'll basically aim to ultimately give at least 90% a year. And so we've embarked on that journey, and we've been working towards that steadily. Years that we've got to we've generally been in the 50 to 90% on an annual basis. There's some years we've touched that, and but yeah, there've been lots of people who've inspired us along the way, philosophers and philanthropists, and but it's been working towards a target.
How about the joy? Talk to us a little bit about that. I'm sure it's quite unparalleled. If you compare it to the 5 lakh check that you got for even knocking down people, I mean, this is a different kind of satisfaction. I mean, it's a lot more genuine. It stays a lot longer, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think there are two things I do. For the last 4 years, I've spent half my time with Bain Capital. As its chairman, I spend half my time running the foundation, and I think over the last many years, that half gives me actually a lot of joy. There are lots of things that we've been doing which have been really fascinating and interesting. Gives me a chance to travel the length and breadth of India, work with a lot of interesting social entrepreneurs, meet a lot of people on the ground who are not just doing interesting work, but also people like I do a lot of work with farmers, and getting to meet people whose life you can transform with simple innovations and techniques is truly satisfying. I mean, I don't think there's anything more enduring than that joy.
You're doing a lot of work in water as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, basically, the government of India is also starting to give out a lot more projects in that regard. I think you're doing a lot of work with the Maharashtra government.
Yeah, we did a lot of work with the Maharashtra government over the last few years. It took a pause last year because of COVID, and we'll have to see what happens this year because the rains have been really plentiful. So we'll have to see what happens. But we've been working on rejuvenation of water bodies in a very big way. Rajasthan was a big focus for us this year. We're looking to work in Karnataka. We'll have to see what happens in Maharashtra. But we believe water is actually one of the biggest issues that faces the country. And if we can actually address water security for farmers in particular, because agriculture consumes about 80% of all our water. And if we can actually create water security for farmers, then it will address one of the biggest reasons we have agri stress in our country. And so that's been a big area of focus for us. And we believe that there are simple things that can be done, not complicated, simple things that are very scalable. And so we've been focusing on those. We work with organizations who can do that, who are strong grassroots organizations. We work on empowering them with these techniques, providing them capital so that they can actually go in their communities and deliver these solutions.
Quite a scarce resource for sure. I mean, water futures are being launched in different parts of the world. And I recently saw an interview of Captain Amrinder Singh where he said that his grandfather didn't have to go too deep into the soil for water. But the amount of, you need to go 10x deeper today to find water than you did during his grandfather's time. So yeah, I take that point, and I think it's a very, very noble cause. But Amit, for someone who's sort of just starting out, in their mid-20s, saying that, age group of 25 to 30, that wants to start doing charity, but is not sure if, they are in that income stream yet, do you still encourage them for whatever their salary may be, whether it's 10 lakhs or 15 lakhs or whatever, after the expense, do you still encourage them to do whatever they can, or, it's only when you feel that, you've achieved something that it needs to be done as a part of your sort of leftover disposable income? How do you approach the sort of concept of philanthropy, so to speak? You hear about the Tatas and the Premjis all the time, but just I'm saying, you're talking about a young individual around 25, 30.
Yeah, no, Rahul, that's a very good question. I would say two things. Uh, First of all, I would say that please start young. That's the best time to start with helping others, is to start young. As I mentioned, Archana and I started when, right from, we got married young. We got married when she and I were both in our first jobs. We had very little disposable income. My salary was 17,500, and her salary was also just about 10,000. And we used to pay almost, I would say, 1/3 of that combined for a paying guest accommodation in on Altamont Road. So you can calculate what the net disposable income was. But yet we basically used to, seed scholarships for kids at that point of time. So I think this is about intent and not about what you're, what it's about your state of your mind. It's about intent. Of course, I mean, you have other responsibilities, and how much you do, you have to balance your family and your responsibilities with your what you want to do for society at large. And so you've got to be thoughtful about that. I'm not suggesting one goes crazy in the early years, but I think start young and at least start experiencing what you can do for society, because society is nurturing you at the same time. Point number one. Point number two is, I also urge youngsters in particular to think about giving a part of their time. Everyone has some time. And there are lots of causes where you can actually volunteer a little bit of your time. It can be on a Saturday. It can be after hours on one of the days of the week. And I think getting involved with a cause, is actually invaluable sometimes, because it also brings you perspective. So give some of your time, and I think that is the other way that you can actually land up.
Your daughter is obviously not old enough to start working, but definitely not young enough that she can't have a mature conversation with her dad. What are conversations with her like? I mean, are they more professional, or has she seen the Amit Chandra, more the giver and the doer? And I've seen so many of your pictures at the Golden Temple as well, in sort of, and I'm sure she's traveled a fair bit with you. So I mean, what's a typical conversation with your daughter like?
Yeah, my daughter's I think, very typical teenager. A lovely teenager she is. So she has a mind of her own. But yet I would say she's a sensitive teenager. Um, she's, I think, very inspired by her mother. Her mother, my wife, Archana, works with special children. She runs one of the largest institutions in the country that serves special children. So Anika, my daughter, volunteers whenever she has spare time. She volunteers there. She's served as a writer for kids who basically take their 10th standard exams for special children who take 10th standard exams who can't write. Because they could have issues with ability to write, so she does that, and she goes and volunteers time as well. So she has actually started relatively early in volunteering for special children. So she's actually started getting sensitized at a relatively early age. I remember she had her first stint in volunteering very, very early on when she started going with me to Akanksha schools. I think she was about 10 or 11 years old at that point of time. So she's very sensitized. She does have a lot of conversations, participates in dinner table conversations with Archana and me. So she's aware of course, everything that we do. But I think by and large, otherwise, the interests are that of a teenager.
You see her making a career out of philanthropy? Or
Very early on, very early. You know, kids have a mind of their own. You gotta let them develop their own interests and see where life takes them.
No, for sure they do. I think Akanksha was the first board you chaired, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
Yes, Akanksha was the first board I chaired. Before I joined DSP, Merrill Lynch, actually, Akanksha was my first board.
What on education, Amit? Ashoka, how did that happen and what is the relevance of Ashoka in your life?
Yeah. You know, it's such a fabulous organization. And came to me actually thanks to Ashish Devan, who's been a good friend for many, many years. And he came to me with the idea, and I met him and Pramad Sinha initially to talk about it. I remember, and I was fascinated by the concept. I had a slightly slower start. I initially, before I committed, Archana and I committed a lot of capital to it. I actually went and used to give guest lectures there. Well before the campus started getting built, I used to give guest lectures at the Young India Fellowship when it was operating out of one room at the Aurobindo campus in Delhi. And when I started actually giving guest lectures there, I realized that they were onto something really special. The curriculum was amazing, and the students were just fabulous, and the faculty was really interesting. And so, you know, I'm not a visionary. It takes time for me to see someone's vision. I'm much more of an executioner. But I could see what Ashish and Pramad's and Sanjeev's vision was. So after a few, spending some sessions there, I actually could see it more clearly as to what they were trying to accomplish. And that got me into the bandwagon. And so I then hopped onto it, and we've been really relatively early supporters of Ashoka. It's been a joy to see that project come together from the stage where we laid the first brick to what it is today. I mean, we've got over 2,000 kids on campus. I think I have no doubt it will be one of Asia's eminent universities. I think it will go beyond being India's number one liberal arts institution. I think it will be one of Asia's best universities, and it will stand for a lot. And it's truly been remarkable seeing that entire thing come together.
More power to you for that. And I think it's already developing into a fantastic franchise. Very early in the conversation, you said you're a goal-oriented guy. What's your next 5 or 10 year goal? Where is Amit Chandra going to be 5 or 10 years now?
No, I think my goal at this point of time is more about how many lives I can impact along with the team at the foundation. I think if I can, and we are going through an exercise right now in water and natural farming, which hopefully in the next 3 months will let us define how many lives we can impact in farmer lives we can impact. And so I'll have more clarity to that. But I would love to be in a position where we can uplift 15, 20 million lives, where we can actually at least double or triple their income in 5 years via the interventions that we are involved with. I think if we if we can do that meaningfully, then I would feel really, really good. Why the other things that we are involved with, we are very involved with social sector capacity building. If we can, we've been involved with building a few institutions. If we can really take them to the next level so that they can be multipliers to society, I think that'll be great. And then, personally, I would love to lose some more weight and
Wouldn't we all?
get ready for the 60s. I've just hit 50. Get ready for the 60s in better shape. That'd be
Wouldn't we all? In fact, I was just having a chat with Varun Berry of Britannia the other day, and I think I just was shocked. I saw him on a TV interview, and I was like, "Man, where is the rest of you?" And he's like, "Well, the lockdowns worked in favor." But
yeah. Lockdowns work for me as well, but I'm only halfway through my target. But I want to read a lot more history. I've started reading history all over again, and I want to read a lot more history. So.
I've seen you ask for recommendations of Sikh literature, etc., on social media. So yeah.
Yes, I read a lot of I've got back into reading. I want to read at least a book every 10 days, 15 days. Get back on the reading habit.
Well, I've just started reading Obama's, about 3 chapters in. It's a very interesting read.
My Obama book just arrived, so it just came in. Venkat Krishnan just sent it to me, so I'm grateful for that.
I'm always like, if you're going to travel, half the weight of your bag is going to be that book. But
yes, it just came in. Mine just came in.
I know how hard it is to get your time, Amit. The last time you and I spoke and I took career advice from you, we were driving in your car. That's how busy I know you off. But you talk about being inspired. I think you've inspired a lot of people. You've mentored a lot of people who went on to do wonderful things professionally. A lot of people speak very highly of you and have learned from your experiences and have learned from you. More power to you, your wife and your daughter, and all the social causes that you're doing. And I hope the people who joined in today, hearing about your professional life and your personal life, walk away with some learnings to incorporate in their day-to-day living. It's been an absolute privilege and a pleasure, Amit. Thank you so much for taking time on this.
Thank you for having me.
Stay safe and be well, and hope to see you in person soon. Thank you.
Wish everyone the same. Thank you.